They say the deepest pain often comes from the ones closest to you. I never wanted to believe that, not until the day my husband collapsed in the kitchen. And a few days later, my sister said something that made the air vanish from a crowded room. My name is Emily Carter, 34. Ballard, just north of Seattle. A quiet neighborhood, a 2-story grey house with a pale wooden porch. Daniel, my husband, kept saying he'd finish repainting it next weekend. We had no kids. Our lives revolved around small rituals. Sunday mornings at the farmer's market. Friday nights watching bad movies just to laugh at them. Little things. The kind of little things that keep two people together. That morning, the kitchen smelled of strong coffee. Daniel stood by the stove, navy mug in hand. "Eggs or cinnamon toast?" he asked. I never answered. The mug slipped, a sharp crack on the tile. Daniel staggered once, eyes gone unfocused, then dropped. I caught his head before it hit the floor. My hands shook as I dialed 911. Everything happened faster than anything I'd ever imagined a medical emergency could. In the ambulance, I held his hand tight, whispering each breath count, as if my words could keep him tethered to me. At the hospital, the doctor's words were clipped. Careful. Brain aneurysm. Almost instant. I nodded. I thanked him. Like someone else was speaking for me. That night, home was unrecognizable. The bedroom felt twice as big. Half the bed empty. 3 glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. Daniel had stuck them there so I wouldn't bump the dresser in the dark. They glowed faintly now. I opened his closet, pulled out the grey hoodie he wore on rainy days. Still smelled of soap and mint. I held it to my chest, like trying to breathe in a rhythm that no longer existed. The funeral came under a low grey sky. Daniel's colleagues filled the pews. He was a surgeon, precise, kind. I tried to read the eulogy. Halfway through, my voice broke. In the back row, my nephew Ethan, Rachel's son, reached out his little hand. "Emily." I squeezed it. In the ash-coloured haze of grief, there was still a spark of light. That night, Rachel stayed after everyone left. She set down a bowl of soup. "Eat a little," she said softly. Her spoon turned in her hand, restless, and for just a moment, her eyes held something layered, not just sorrow, something else. I shook it off, told myself not to imagine shadows when we were all exhausted. Later, I opened the safe. Daniel always kept things orderly. Insurance papers, wills, folders labelled. And at the very bottom, an envelope, craft paper, sealed. On the front, in his handwriting, "Emily, only if you need to." I put it back. I didn't need to. Not yet. The next days were filled with silence. The fridge hum, the creak of wood under my feet. I tried making coffee, poured it out, folded the blanket the way Daniel used to, smoothing the corners flat. Strange how something so small could calm me. Then a family text. "Sunday, Ethan's first birthday. Everyone come." My mother added, "Go, Emily. It will help." I stared at the screen, finally typed, "I'll be there." The night before, I wrapped Ethan's gift, a small red wooden car. As I taped the ribbon, a stack of papers slipped from a folder. A medical record, Daniel's vasectomy. We had chosen that together 2 years ago. A long, serious conversation. We trusted each other, respected each other. I slid the papers back into place. At the time, it felt like nothing more than a reminder of our trust. I didn't know it would one day matter. Sunday morning, rare sunshine in Seattle. The party was at a cozy Italian restaurant, red brick walls, warm lights. Children's laughter bounced against the ceiling, balloons popping now and then. Rachel placed Ethan in my arms. He smelled of baby powder, soft as vanilla. "Happy birthday, sweet boy," I whispered. She smiled, but her eyes kept scanning the room, waiting for something. The cake came out, white frosting, blue letters, Ethan, 1. Everyone leaned in, and that's when Rachel raised her glass. "Thank you all for coming, and thank you, Emily, for loving Ethan so much." I nodded. She paused, took a deep breath. "There's something I think it's time to say." The room fell still. I could hear my own heartbeat, not racing, not slow, just steady. Rachel looked at me, then at everyone. "Ethan isn't only my son." I steadied my hands on my lap. "Go on," I whispered. Her words were deliberate. "Ethan is Daniel's child." A spoon clattered against a plate. A few gasps. I stood, quietly pushed in my chair. Rachel reached into her bag and pulled out papers, clipped neatly together. "Daniel left a will, half the house, for Ethan. I'll handle the paperwork on his behalf." I stared at the stack, perfectly aligned, as if order could disguise truth. Inside, part of me wanted to react instantly. Another part stayed still, cold and calm. I thought of the medical file, the craft envelope in the safe, all of it flashing through in less than a breath. I smiled faintly, just enough to keep my voice steady. "Rachel," I said, "this should be discussed privately. Today is Ethan's birthday." She shook her head. "I want everyone to know, so Ethan is recognized." I excused myself, stepped into the hallway, not to escape, but to switch gears. I opened my phone, typed 2 lines in notes, craft envelope, safe, medical record, vasectomy, deep breath, back to the table. I sat down smoothly, as if I'd never left. "All right," I said evenly. "If this is to be public, then we'll do it properly. Lawyers will review the documents, medical records will be checked, and most importantly, today is still Ethan's birthday. Let's celebrate it fully." A silence settled, then someone suggested cutting the cake. Ethan smeared frosting on his cheek, giggling, blissfully unaware of the storm around him. I looked at him, then at Rachel, and in her eyes, I caught something fleeting, worry, defiance, and a flicker I couldn't quite name. As the candles were lit again, I understood. Truth doesn't need to be loud. It just needs the right place. I pressed out a stray flame that had fallen onto the tablecloth, and in that moment I felt calm, because tonight I would open the envelope, and that's when everything would truly begin. Ethan's birthday party ended in a strange kind of silence. There was still laughter, still cake, but I knew every look in that room had shifted. Some pitied me, some doubted me, others stared, hungry for gossip. I felt like a character shoved onto the stage of a play I never auditioned for. Rachel sat across the table, her face calm, but her hands twisted tight in her lap. She had dropped the bomb, and now she was waiting for it to shatter my life. I slipped out quietly, after wiping the frosting off Ethan's shirt. The little boy was so innocent it hurt to breathe. I held him close, kissed his soft hair, then handed him back. To Rachel I said, my voice so steady it surprised even me, "Tomorrow I'll call you. We'll discuss this where it belongs." She only nodded, but in her eyes, something flickered. Confidence? Fear? I didn't stop to decode it. That night the house was too quiet. The tick of the clock sounded like footsteps. I sat in my study, lamp casting a circle of light on the desk. My hands rested on the safe. The code clicked. The door opened. Inside, insurance papers, Daniel's will, and, still, the craft envelope. "Emily, only if you need to." I sat still, waiting for my own permission. Then I tore it open. On top, the medical record, Daniel's vasectomy. 2 years ago. I already knew. But seeing the seal, the doctor's signature, the date, it felt like Daniel was still here, still protecting me from Rachel's lie. Underneath, a small black leather notebook. Daniel's handwriting. He had logged things. Late-night calls from Rachel. Ambiguous texts. He never told me, just wrote them down. The last page stopped my breath. If anything ever happens, Emily must know. I have always been faithful. I never betrayed her. Tears spilled. I pressed the book to my chest and sobbed, days of grief breaking loose all at once, not just for the loss, but because Daniel's love, even gone, was still shielding me. The next morning, I met with Daniel's attorney. I laid everything out, party, documents, the notebook. He listened carefully, then looked me in the eye. "Emily," he said, firm, "your sister forged these papers. In court, proving that won't be hard. But before we take that step, you need to understand why. We need her motive." It was sound advice. That's when I decided to hire a private investigator, because no one invents a lie that big out of pure impulse. There had to be a reason, something cornering Rachel. 3 days later, the report hit my desk. I flipped through the pages, pulse hammering. Rachel owed $75,000. Credit cards, personal loans, back rent. Her lease was about to be cancelled. She hadn't held a job in nearly a year, living off assistance and debt. I closed the file and exhaled. So that was it. Money. But why drag Daniel's name into it? Why use an innocent child? Anger surged through me, but behind it, disappointment. Disappointment in the sister I once defended against our parents. The sister I once lent money to in college, now spinning a web to trap me. That night, I sat in the living room, staring out at the porch Daniel never got to paint. And in my mind, I could hear him. "Be strong, Emily. Don't let anyone take what's yours. And don't let Ethan pay the price." I knew what I had to do. Face Rachel, directly. No more sidestepping, no more pretending. If my sister wanted to turn this into a chess game, then I'd play. But this time, the rules would be mine. After meeting with the lawyer, I realized something. I wasn't the passive one anymore. If Rachel could invent a lie that big, then the only way to stop it was to drag the truth into the light. I worked with a private investigator, Mark Holden. He'd partnered with Daniel before on a few patient-related cases. Mark was in his 50s, quiet, eyes sharp as blades. From the first handshake, I knew I could trust him. Within a week, he sent me a thick file. I opened it under the desk lamp, like peeling masks off my sister's face. Credit card statements, fancy restaurants, designer stores, but no regular payments. Personal loans stacked high, $75,000 in debt, a landlord's warning letter stamped in red, lease cancelled if not paid in 30 days. I read every word, every number, and the feeling was cold, heavy. Rachel wasn't just struggling, she was drowning, and instead of climbing out, she dragged Daniel's name and Ethan's innocence into her lie. I sat still for a long time. Memories came flooding back. High school, when I gave Rachel my lunch money because she'd forgotten her wallet. College, when I worked extra shifts to cover part of her rent. I told myself that was sisterly duty, love. Now I saw it clearly, that love had been taken for granted for years. The next morning, I carried the file to the lawyer. He read every page, slow, deliberate. Then he looked up. "Emily, if you want, we can take this to court, with Daniel's medical records, the legitimate will, and evidence of Rachel's debt. The forged documents won't stand a chance. Do you want to sue?" I stayed silent. I pictured Rachel in front of a judge, exposed as a fraud, and Ethan, her 1-year-old, seeing his mother through the glass of a courtroom door. The image cut me deep. "No," I whispered. "Not yet. I want to speak to her first. If she admits it, I'll choose another way." The lawyer nodded, didn't argue, just warned, "Then bring evidence when you confront her." Words alone are easy to deny. That night, I laid everything out on the living room table. Daniel's medical file, the real will notarized, his journal with those words that still broke my heart, and finally, the report on Rachel's debts. I stacked them neatly, like preparing for a private trial of my own. For a moment, my eyes lifted to the wedding photo on the wall. Daniel and me, smiling under an arch of white flowers. I touched the glass, whispered, "I promise I won't let them smear your name. I'll protect Ethan too. You'd agree with me, wouldn't you?" In the silence, I almost heard his answer, not in words, but in the calm that spread through me. The next day, I called Rachel. Her voice trembled when I suggested meeting at a small cafe, a few blocks from downtown. She agreed. Maybe she thought her forged will could still sway me. I hung up. My heart pounded. It would be the first time I'd look her straight in the eyes and say, "You betrayed me." In that moment, I knew I wasn't the grieving widow anymore. I was becoming someone else, a woman who could draw the line, a woman who would protect what mattered. Rachel had opened the game. Now. It was my move. I chose a small cafe on Pine Street, quiet, warm yellow light, wooden tables spaced far enough apart that no one could overhear. I arrived early, sat by the window. Outside, Seattle wore a thin veil of rain. On the table, my leather bag. Inside, every document. The truth, stacked neatly, waiting. Minutes later, Rachel walked in. Beige coat, heavy makeup, but the dark circles under her eyes betrayed her. She spotted me, forced a smile. "Emily." Her voice tentative, testing. I didn't answer, just gestured to the chair. The waiter brought coffee. The door closed behind the last customer. Suddenly, the room felt like it belonged only to us. Rachel sipped her cup, pretending calm. I let the silence stretch, then opened my bag. The first file slid across the table. "You recognize this, don't you?" She looked down. The hospital record, Daniel's vasectomy, 2 years ago. Her face changed, just for a moment. Why are you bringing that up?" she stammered. "At the party, you claimed Ethan was Daniel's son, but you knew that was impossible. This is proof." Rachel bit her lip, stayed silent. I pulled out the next file. The real will, notarized, nothing like the fake she waved at the birthday table. "And here," I said evenly, "is Daniel's legal will. Ethan isn't mentioned. The one you presented was forgery." Rachel inhaled sharply as though the air had thinned, but I wasn't finished. I laid down Mark's report, debt totals, warning letters, numbers that screamed. "You owe $75,000, Rachel. You couldn't keep up. You were desperate. So you built a lie. You dragged Daniel's name through it, and you used Ethan. Do you realize what you've done?" Tears broke free. Her hands trembled as she set her cup down. I never meant it to go this far," she whispered. "I just thought, if I had half the house, Ethan and I could escape. I was so tired." I looked at her, my sister, the one I once protected. The sight cut deep, anger, pain, both at once. "Rachel," I said, voice thick but firm, "you can be tired. You can make mistakes. But you don't get to smear Daniel. You don't get to use Ethan. You betrayed me. Not once. Many times." Rachel dropped her head to the table, sobbed. "I'm sorry. Emily, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to do anymore. It feels like the whole world is collapsing." I closed my eyes, let the storm inside me settle. I could take her to court. She would pay dearly. But Ethan's innocent face rose in my mind. That child hadn't chosen any of this. I drew a deep breath, opened my eyes, met hers. "You're going to admit everything, publicly. You'll apologize, and you'll accept my conditions. If you do that, I won't sue. But if you lie again, even once, I swear I will not hold back." Rachel lifted her head, eyes red, wet. She nodded. It was only a beginning, but at least, for today, truth had won. Outside, the Seattle rain thickened, washing the tension from the air. I sat still, hand resting on the files, and I felt Daniel, here, with me, watching, steadying. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, I knew I was the one in control. After the cafe meeting, I spent the whole night awake. The anger was still there, but the sadness, so much heavier. I could take Rachel to court, expose everything, let justice tear it wide open. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's face, an innocent child, carrying the weight of his mother's mistakes. I knew I needed another way, a path that would protect Daniel's name and Ethan's future. The next morning, I called Rachel, asked her to come to my house. When she walked in, her eyes were swollen from crying. The living room was silent, the table cleared, except for a blank stack of paper, a pen, and my laptop, waiting. "Sit," I said. My voice wasn't angry, but it wasn't soft either. Rachel sat, fingers tangled. "Emily, I know you're disappointed in me. I'm sorry." I drew a breath, looked straight into her eyes. "Rachel, sorry isn't enough. You created a lie that could destroy everything Daniel and I built. You stained his memory. And worst, you used Ethan as a pawn." Her head dropped. "Silence," I continued. "But I thought all night. And I don't want to drag you into court. I don't want Ethan to grow up remembering his mother being exposed like that. But if I'm going to forgive you, you'll accept my terms." Her eyes flickered, nervous. "What terms?" I placed the pen on the table, spoke slowly. "First, you will apologize publicly, not just to me, to our parents, and to everyone who sat in that room at Ethan's birthday. You'll admit you forged the will, and admit you lied about Daniel." Rachel winced. Her lips trembled. "Do you have to humiliate me like that?" My voice hardened. "That isn't humiliation, that's truth, and you owe Daniel the truth." She went quiet, then nodded. "Second, I'll set up a trust fund for Ethan, for his education, his health, nothing else. I'll oversee it. He'll get what he needs, but you won't touch a single cent for yourself." Tears filled her eyes again, this time softer. "Emily, thank you. Ethan, he really needs that." "Third," I said firmly, "you will change. Therapy, to learn how to face pressure, financial counseling, and you'll find a stable job. I'll help you connect the dots, but you'll do the work. If you refuse, I'll cut you off completely." Rachel buried her face in her hands, then sobbed. "I'll do it. I don't have a choice. I don't want to lose you. Or Ethan." I sat still, watching the sister who had hurt me more than anyone ever had, and yet, inside me, something else stirred. Not softness, not forgiveness, but maybe a flicker of hope. I placed my hand flat on the table, my voice low. "Rachel, I'm giving you this chance, but only once. If you betray me again, I won't hesitate. I'll take it all to court, I swear it, on Daniel and on myself." She nodded over and over, tears dripping onto the table. "I understand. I promise I'll change." In that moment, I felt a weight lift, not completely, but enough. For the first time, there was a clear line drawn. I was no longer the woman standing still while others pulled the strings. I was the one choosing. Outside, the rain had stopped. A thin sunlight spilled across the pale wood of the table. I looked at that light and thought, maybe this was the beginning of something new. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Forgiveness means drawing boundaries and protecting what matters most. 1 year after Daniel's passing, I stood in the small garden behind our house. The lavender we planted together had bloomed, soft purple, swaying gently in the wind. I brushed my fingers over the petals, remembering his hand on my shoulder. Steady, certain. Time had passed, the pain never disappeared, but it changed shape, from a violent storm to an underground current, sometimes calm, sometimes rising, and I had learned to live with it. I no longer lay awake all night staring at the empty pillow. I no longer woke each morning asking, "Why Daniel?" Now I rise early, open the window, breathe in the cold Seattle air, and think, he's still here. In every detail, Rachel has changed. At first, I doubted her, afraid it was just another act. But she went to therapy, met with a financial advisor, found part-time work in a bookstore, not perfect, but a beginning. And Ethan, he grows every day, bright eyes like Daniel's, though not his child. Each time I hold him, I know why I chose conditional forgiveness, because Ethan deserves a future untouched by his mother's mistakes. The trust fund is active now. Every contribution feels like planting seeds of hope. There was something else I did. I created the Daniel Carter Scholarship Fund for medical students in need. Daniel once said his dream wasn't just to heal, but to give others the chance to heal. At the first ceremony, when his name echoed through the auditorium, I sat in the audience, hands clasped tight. Tears fell, but my heart felt lighter. He was gone, yet his mark lived on, carried inside others. Along the way, I met Michael Grant, a friend from the Widows Support Group. Michael wasn't Daniel, and that was the comfort. He didn't try to replace him, didn't intrude on memories. He simply listened when I needed, sat in silence when I wanted quiet. We started walking together on weekends, sometimes coffee by the lake. Few words, just peace. Once Michael told me, "Emily, I don't think pain ever disappears, but I believe we can learn to live, not despite it, but with it." I smiled, because that was exactly what I had learned. This afternoon, I cleaned my study, opened the safe, took out Daniel's black leather journal. I turned to the last page, the one he wrote for me. "If anything ever happens, Emily must know. I was always faithful. I never betrayed her." I pressed my hand against the page, closed my eyes. "I know, Daniel. I've always known, and I'll keep living the way you'd want me to." Outside, the sky opened, a break in the clouds. The last rays of the day spilled across the lavender garden, and for the first time, I felt a new kind of peace, not because the wounds had healed, but because I had chosen to walk forward with them. Loss taught me boundaries, betrayal taught me strength, and love, whether in memory or in the present, still teaches me hope. I smiled, for the first time in months, a full, unbroken smile. Life would never be the same, but I didn't want it to be. I wanted to move forward, with Daniel's memory, with responsibility for Ethan, and with a path carved by my own hands.